Hi, I'm Mike Stack, exercise physiologist with Applied Fitness Solutions. On today's Fit Clip, we're going to talk a little bit about carbohydrates and low carbohydrate diets. So the first thing we need to talk about are why carbohydrates are so important to the body. It seems like over the course of the past 50 years, carb has become that dirty four-letter word, and it certainly shouldn't be that. Carbohydrates are one of the four major macronutrients. These are the four nutrients that we need to consume in large quantities so our body stays alive. Cutting carbohydrates out of your diet would be analogous to cutting water out of your diet. You simply cannot survive without carbohydrates. One of the primary reasons that carbohydrates sustain life function is because it is the exclusive fuel source for your central nervous system, your brain, and your spinal cord. Beyond that, carbohydrates act to provide fuel for nearly all of the exercise we perform, and it also provides a protective benefit to muscle tissue during exercise, because by taking in enough carbohydrates, you actually spare the breakdown of muscle during exercise. So bottom line is, carbohydrates are a nutrient you absolutely have to consume, and in fact, it should comprise more than 50% of your diet. So I'm sure most of you have tried a low carbohydrate diet from one time or another, and it probably seemed to work for you, right? At least a little bit. I mean, you're stepping on the scale, you're seeing that you're losing weight, but is it the weight that you want to lose? Is it fat weight, or is it something else? And the unfortunate answer is it's something else. When you go on a low carbohydrate diet, you lose a little bit of fat, because most people take in 50% of their calories or more from carbs, so you cut your carbs, you cut your calories, you lose fat. But what you lose the lion's share of is water weight in your muscles, and you also lose a fair amount of stored protein weight, or actual muscle tissue, because your body needs the carbohydrate to be able to sustain life functions, and in its absence, you break down a lot of muscle tissue. So despite what you might have read or have heard about a low carbohydrate diet, we need to establish what's actually happening on a physiological level, what we know happens from a science perspective. I mentioned a moment ago that you lose the majority of weight on a low carbohydrate diet from water weight. Now, why does that happen? Well, your carbs are stored around the body in your muscles primarily, but also a little bit in your liver. We store about 400 to 500 grams of carbohydrates around the body. For every 1 gram of carb you store 4 grams of water with it. So when you reduce your carbohydrate intake, not only do you lose those 400 to 500 grams of carbohydrate, which is weight, you also lose 4 grams of water with every gram of carb. So now we're talking about well over 2 to 3 pounds lost just in water weight. Beyond that, when you drop your carbs, you always increase your protein. You have to balance it out somehow, and in taking in more protein, you actually have to urinate more, because there's a component of the protein that we can only get rid of when we urinate. So now we've lost water in our muscles because we're not storing as much carbohydrate in our muscles, and we've lost water weight because we're urinating more to get rid of some of the excess waste associated with the protein. Still haven't lost any fat weight yet. Okay, so we've established how we lose water weight on a low carbohydrate diet, and that we're really not losing the weight that we want to lose yet. Well, what about the rest of the weight that you lose? The rest of the weight you lose is primarily in the form of skeletal muscle tissue. I've never really met anybody who's actually on a diet, or a low carbohydrate diet, that isn't exercising. And when you exercise, you break down primarily carbohydrate. When that carbohydrate isn't there, even in small quantities, the only fuel source your body can shift to break down from an energy perspective is muscle tissue. So people who go on low carbohydrate diets can lose pounds and pounds and pounds of muscle tissue over the course of weeks and over the course of months, because they're shifting to a muscle burning state, not a fat burning state, in the absence of consuming carbohydrates. So guys, cutting carbs is like cutting water. If I told you to reduce your water intake by 75% for the next 2 weeks, you would think I'm absolutely nuts. Well, that's exactly what people are telling you to do when they tell you to reduce your carbohydrate intake substantially. You're reducing one of the essential macronutrients. It isn't healthy, it isn't safe, and for the reasons we've talked about today, it doesn't really work. So if you want to lose body fat and you want to keep it off, cut your calories, not your carbs. You can reduce your carbs a little bit, but reduce your protein a little bit and your fat a little bit too. In fact, fat is the most calorie-dense nutrient that there is. It's twice as calorie-dense as carb or protein. So if you reduce your fat intake, not only will you reduce calories faster, you'll also be healthier in the process. Calorie deficit, not carbohydrate deficit. That's what gets you to lose body fat, and that's what gets you to keep it off.